All right, notifications going crazy here. Gonna mute that. There we go. All right, everyone, let's get the show started. Welcome to Office Hours. It's January 15th. My name is Eric Osterman, and I'll be leading the conversation. I'm the CEO and founder of Cloud Posse. We are a DevOps accelerator. We help startups own their infrastructure in record time by building it for you and then showing you the ropes. For those of you new to the call, the format of this call is very informal. My goal is to get your questions answered. Feel free to unmute yourself at any time if you want to jump in and participate. We host these calls every week. We'll automatically post a video recording of this session to the Office Hours channel, as well as follow up with an email so you can share it with your team. If you want to share something in private, just ask and we can temporarily suspend the recording. With that said, let's kick off this Office Hours. So here are some talking points I put together. One announcement I'd like to make is just today, I think HashiCorp announced that the Terraform providers are going to be distributed as part of the HashiCorp registry. So this is like what is available today with Terraform modules. The caveat here is right now it's only official providers. They are working to open it up to third parties and other providers to publish their providers. I guess for the security implications of this, they're just being very careful about how they go about that. Anyways, this is exciting news because anyone who's tried to use third-party providers, it's been a real pain. So if in the near future they fix that, I'll be very happy. Another public service announcement, we said this last week, just want to share it again because I'm pretty sure a bunch of companies are going to get bit by it. The root certificates that affect RDS, Aurora, and DocumentDB are expiring in March. If you're using certificate validation with your instances, that's going to break unless you upgrade your certificate bundle for those instances, or for the nodes that your clients run on. Those certificate bundles need to be updated. All right. So the next thing, we have a question from Pierre in our community. He posted in Office Hours. He has also some feedback because he asked in the Kubernetes Office Hours and got some answers there too. So we'll see how that reconciles with what we recommend. And then a demo, if time permitting. We wanted to do this last week. We ran out of time. I just want to show you how we've been able to use Cloudflare as kind of like this Swiss Army knife reverse proxy for injecting HTML, CSS into sites that we don't necessarily control. All right, let's start with you, Pierre. So the question you'd asked was how to provide a module or a tool to our application developers to provision the databases for them, including the deployment of the secrets inside of Kubernetes. And in Office Hours right now in that channel, if you check, there's a link there to a Terraform repository where it looks like, Pierre, you started kind of like a POC with putting something together.
Well, it's basically, for me, it's in our infrastructure as code repositories right now. Mm-hmm. And we wanted or would like to move that basically to the application developers. This is a private project of mine that's similar, is pretty similar to the infrastructure that we use at work. So if you would go to the Kubernetes Helm Notifier Terraform plan file, yeah. This is, oh no, oh wait, there's another one for Postgres, I think. Postgres Helm Notifier, down on the bottom. So ideally, these two would be one file, and we could give this to our application developers. And they can just maintain this. And currently, we get roughly around 2 to 10 requests, pull requests on our infrastructure as code repository, and from external people, and we still have our own people. So currently, it kind of gets to the point where it's cumbersome to maintain all these pull requests. And we were thinking about just like putting it out. So I asked the same question in the Kubernetes Office Hours, where a lot of knowledgeable people are. And they basically said, well, it worsened their developer experience because in the end, they are not SRE. They don't know much about DevOps, application developer in general. And yeah, it just reduced their productivity from the application developers because they didn't understand Terraform. That's the feedback that I got from them, but I would be happy to know if you are doing something similar.
Yeah. So there's two things at stake here. There's one is kind of like your stated approach or objective that you're trying to do right now. And this is one way to do it. what you describe here is kind of like how I would automate the production of perhaps your production grade backing services for Helm Notifier. For those of you who don't know, Helm Notifier is a project that Pierre is working on. It's a Helm. It's a tool to visualize differences between Helm releases or Helm charts. And here is kind of like some of the infrastructure code to deploy that. So what we have here is some Terraform code that generates some random secrets, that provisions a Postgres role in the database, and then writes those secrets that were generated into Kubernetes, into a specific namespace with those values, including the database URI in this case is what he's writing there. So hold that thought. Doing this in Terraform is great. And at some point, you're probably going to want to do that. Like for your production grade services, this is what you're going to do. What we don't recommend, though, is for preview environments or pull request environments, or what we sometimes call unlimited staging environments. We wouldn't use Terraform in this case. In this case, what we would be using is, as part of your Helm chart, you would have the ability to enable backing services that chart depends on. And then that makes it very easy to spin up a fully self-contained environment within Kubernetes just by deploying that Helm chart into a new release. Then the chart itself can generate those random passwords using the rand function, whatever it is, in Helm templates, and it's easy. Okay, so that solves kind of like, I think, the problem actually that you're trying to address right now, but it doesn't solve kind of your initial request. Like, how is this the right approach that we should take for, say, production environments, if I reframe your question? And so that was the way I had first actually interpreted it when I had seen your question. And it's something that we've been thinking about too at Cloud Posse. Is like, how can we move the dependencies for backing services of your applications that we need to provision with Terraform closer to the applications themselves and not in like some centralized infrastructure repository? Because you don't want to have to open one PR in the infrastructure repository like most companies have, and then another PR for your application and coordinate that whole process. Right,
that's the main problem, because we only unregularly push our infrastructure as code to production or even to staging. And application developers might be faster than us and want to push their service to staging already. And they have to wait for SRE to push it to the next stage.
That's a good point. One that I didn't bring up. So you're also talking about not just existing services, but also net new services that are deployed. Yeah. What's that process? Yeah. Okay. So the approach that we are starting to lean towards, but I can't say that we have fully achieved it. And I think there's some others here on the call that have. Maybe Dale has done it, or Andrew Roth maybe if he's on. But would be to have the Terraform, in each one of your microservices, you have a Terraform application folder in there. And that would have the backing services that it needs. Now, what you described here, yes, this is a perfect application of what you have in here. This should be captured inside of a Terraform module, and then that module will be versioned separately in and of itself. And then you might want to have some automated tests related to that separately. But then when you want to instantiate that, how do you do that? Well, that's where now in your applications repository, let's say Helm Notifier is your application repository, there'll be a subfolder in there called Terraform, and that's where you're going to invoke that module as part of your CI/CD pipeline. The question is then, what do we do about the integration secrets? How do we get those there so that's going to work? Well, in the easiest case is that depending on what you're using for your CI/CD, I'm going to say, let's say you're using Jenkins. If you're using Jenkins, it's going to use the standard credential store, and then your pipeline will indicate that that's the credential store it's going to use, and then it can just go ahead and provision this stuff from scratch. But the challenge is if you have some credentials that can be programmatically generated and some that needs to be user generated, that's the challenge. And that's very often the case. Like if you're integrating with third-party APIs and you're developing a new service, how do you get those secrets in there for the first time? I don't have a brilliant answer for that. We usually just see people key those in as part of that cold start.
Well, this kind of stuff we already have solved with Terraform variables. We just put them in env variables and then just put the Terraform variable inside of the secret configuration. So that's how we do this kind of stuff.
That's fine. Mostly that works. And then that also empowers the developer to set that environment variable in your CICD line. Okay.
Yeah. So this is how we are doing that. Or they're using basically the services and just do JQ and try to get it somewhere else. For example, Google Maps. Someone wrote a bash script to generate Google Maps secrets because they don't have Terraform support. So, but yeah, if someone has ideas about this, I would be super happy to know how you are doing this kind of stuff. If you are doing it, it's more like exploratory right now. So yeah.
Also, I'm curious, anybody interject. In the answer I gave, was there some disconnect I missed there, which is the part that you're struggling with?
It's more like I wanted to know if people are already doing it and what their experience was with it. Because, that's the feedback that I got from the Kubernetes office hours. Yeah. They tried it and developers didn't understand why they now have to approve infrastructure as code as part of their deployment process. It's like they had to approve. They did it this way. They approved basically the Terraform plan. Then the Terraform plan got executed, and then the application promotion got executed and approved.
Gotcha.
So you doubled your approval gates because they moved the infrastructure as code into.
I think that's going to largely depend on the organization culturally, how they approach this stuff. I kind of react to that. This is kind of like OPP, other people's problems, as it relates to code reviews. I kind of reflect to that. Don't you want to grow, career-wise and learn these things? And I think requiring code owners in your repository so that when certain files are changed, that an approval comes from one of those people, I think that's a way to mitigate some of that. But that can be all bundled into the same code review process. Perhaps it slows it down a little bit initially.
Yeah.
The one other thing I wanted to say is, so the challenge here is that we're spanning tool sets, right? Like if all of this worked just through kubectl, so to say, or like the Kubernetes API, it'd be a little bit easier. Versus here,
sorry, go ahead. I will answer in one second.
Oh, versus here, what we're doing is we're straddling two tool sets. We're straddling a Kubernetes tool set and Terraform tool set.
Yeah.
For deployment. And this is where I think that now, if we look in this repository, you're technically using DigitalOcean, so it's a little different here.
Yeah.
And some of our answers would be probably more AWS focused. But this is where like the AWS service operator is also, I think, really exciting. Is the ability, not necessarily this project, but this technique, this strategy. So you have a Kubernetes, interesting, it's been archived. I don't know what the difference is. But basically you have a CRD that you deploy that defines that part of the infrastructure so that you can stick within the same tool set to deploy.
That's cool. I actually today found Kubeform, which basically gives Kubernetes CRDs for Terraform providers. I posted in the office hour channels.
Oh, cool.
Did not explore it yet, but I think it could also solve my issue where it's a second link, not the first one.
Oops.
Yeah, where people. No, that's the wrong one. Or maybe it's the same. Yeah, Kubeform. Yeah.
Looks like this has gotten a lot more. Yeah, I guess I have not seen this one because Rancher started with one as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I have not tried it out yet, but it seems like you get a CID for your Terraform providers and can then do the same stuff.
Oh, yeah. Kubeform, they also do this. Hold on, let me double check that on. Okay, so it is just, I thought Kubeform did more than Terraform, but okay.
Yes. Never tried it yet. So I just found it today, like a couple hours ago, but I will take a look into it.
That is cool. Has anybody kicked the tires on Kubeform?
Yeah, it would be nice.
Haven't yet. Actually, this is the first time I actually heard about it.
Yeah, yeah. Was this based from the one from Capgemini, or is that a fork?
I'm not sure. I did not investigate too much, to be honest.
Yeah, they have other products as well. Cube Vault.
I think Kubeform is from like App Code or something like that.
Yeah, that's what it was. When we went to their website, it was saying apps code.
They do a handful of things. I haven't looked at them too deeply, though. Interesting looking projects, though.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. But yeah, you nailed it. That's kind of like what I was thinking is, I think that's where things are going to get easier and easier. There's more of this is that we can use Kubernetes as the scheduler for everything to do.
Yeah.
Cool. I do want to embarrass Dale here a little bit. Dale just got his certified Kubernetes administrator exam, CKA. So passed that. Congratulations, Dale. Glad you accomplished that.
Great, thanks.
And that means anybody else who has serious Kubernetes questions, ask Dale. So, any other questions? Let's see here. Got something in chat.
Did someone actually do the Kubernetes application developer certificate yet?
Oh, the CD. No, I don't know.
CKAD, yeah.
CK. Is that next on your list, Dale?
This one actually kind of keep me bored a little bit. Maybe I'm actually thinking to go more into the security side of things as well and data science. So I'm not sure I may be doing that yet.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
By the way, Dale posted the resources he used to pass that exam in the Kubernetes channel in SuiteOps. So check that out. Yeah,
the first link for Linux Academy really does a good overview on Kubernetes itself, but the one on Udemy itself actually does practice tests that are pretty spot on with some of the questions that I actually got with it. So, doing both of them, you pretty much cover everything.
Cool.
I have a question, guys. This is Michael.
Hey, Michael.
Long time listener.
It looks cold wherever you're at.
Yeah, man, New York City. So I finally kind of got in the weeds with this project I've been talking about ever since I started here, which was the ephemeral URL service within CodeFresh. And so, one of the things I do is I basically create a Rancher context using Rancher to create a project. The project has shared configuration, so it acts like a meta namespace. And then what I'm doing is because we have essentially microservices that need to act as an application in this context, right? So what I've done is I've used Helm file, right, to basically install all of the applications as they are from the release branch of the latest, the latest coming from our sort of next branch of the Helm charts, and then basically running it again with just the diff of the image tag and what have you. And so I'm trying to figure out the best way to do that. Next part, I tried to do Helm file apply with just the using a selector, right, and with the namespace. But then what that seemed to do was it all just ended up being reverting back to all having the same image tag and not like overriding it with that diff. I'm not sure how to is that something I can do in a command line? Do I have to like write a file? I'm quite unsure about what
All right.
needed to do that in that circumstance. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, let me summarize that in my own words. Also add some more context, I think, for everyone else. So you're using Rancher's distribution of Kubernetes. Rancher has this concept of projects, and you're using CodeFresh as your CI/CD platform. You want to create preview environments, or like these unlimited staging environments, as we call them. And to do that, you've defined your entire application architecture as part of multiple Helm charts or releases. And all those Helm charts or releases are in this Helm file. And now you're deploying that Helm file as part of your CI/CD pipeline. And when you build a new image, you want to update that service. Now the part or this is the part where I lost you a little bit, is the problem like why Helm file apply wouldn't be working for you.
Well, I mean, I think I was running Helm file sync at first. Well, I think it's because I guess initially I'm doing this in the mono repo itself, right? Like, so it's not all of the, at least right now at the moment, weren't being published yet because we're still kind of building out the pipeline. So they weren't like officially published. We don't have a versioning. I mean, another question I want to ask is a versioning system for this. I'm trying to figure that out to be able to create canary builds and that kind of stuff and whatnot with, I have other tools I use for my libraries that I oversee, like NPM libraries that use like auto and semantic versioning, but I'm unsure how to be able to make that work here. But aside from that, what was the question you asked?
No, or so I didn't. So I struggled to see where I didn't understand the problem you were talking about with diffs or patches or things like that. Were you using tools outside of Helm or outside of Helm file to do the patching or changing images?
No. I mean, I just use CodeFresh to create the new image tag, and then I don't like save that to file. I just kind of pass that as a set, I was trying to pass it as a set to the second, so I do the Helm file apply, which applies everything, and I basically do a Helm upgrade with the diff, for the one service that I'm trying to, see against the overall. And I was unsure, which one to run. Like, do I run Helm file sync a second time, Helm file apply the first time? Do I run Helm? I'm not entirely clear which of those I should be running in order to be able to do I do apply against the sync or, exactly.
I understand the confusion. And so part of the confusion is like Helm file as a tool has been growing really rapidly and accepting a lot of PRs and things like that. So sync was the original command that Helm file came out with, but then to kind of more closely align with the pattern of Terraform where you have plan and apply and destroy, Helm file implemented the same things. So from what I recall, I think Helm file apply honors the installed flag inside of your releases so that you can maintain the state of whether a service is installed or not installed. While Helm file sync, I don't believe will uninstall services based on that installed flag versus apply. So that's the difference. Now, what you're doing, I can't say it's wrong, like the two-phase apply process, but it's different than what we do. So what we do is that configuration, like for Helm file, you would use environments, for example, and in the environments, if you don't want to rewrite that file, or if you want that dynamic, then that can just refer to a Go template macro or interpolation function for get end, right? To get that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing, actually, to be clear.
Okay.
I was doing that itself, and what I found was just weird stuff with like. Let me think. Initially, I have environments, like with ephemeral and prod and QA, which is where my static values live, right? So that's where the main things live. But the image tags is what essentially all I want to do to override. Now, if I tried to float up the env up to everything there, then everything would have the same, value that I set.
Okay, I see what you're saying. But that just sounds like the schema is wrong if your Helm file. So like that.
I don't know
like,
very well.
okay, yeah. So,
Yeah.
so not everyone is familiar with Helm file. Helm file is a tool that helps you describe all the Helm chart releases that you want to have in your cluster. And the problem with Helm is, right, that the values file is static. It doesn't support any templating, any interpolation functions, anything like that. So the tool Helm file came out and let you describe now what Helm releases you want to have, and lets you as a developer kind of define your own schema in the form of what they call environments. The problem with Helm and Helm charts is that every Helm chart, every developer has their own way of describing how to install this application. So it looks like a mess when you try and stitch these things together. Versus with Helm file, now you can define that schema. All right, so in this schema, in your case, you have somewhere where it says image tag, but it sounds like you only define that in one place. It sounds like what you want to achieve is you want to define the image tag for each service in this monorepo.
Well, there's a difference. What I'm trying to do for the ephemeral, right, is only define, is I have a default, so it falls back to like, the next tag, which is what we tag everything with once it goes to QA. But then I want to override just a single image tag for a single service. Now, what I'm actually doing now, because I couldn't figure out how to do the Helm file twice, is I'm just doing the Helm file a sync on everything, and then just running Helm itself against the one release and upgrading it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I get it, and that can work. I think maybe if you're able to, and perhaps after the call or even during, if we have time, if you can share some portion of that Helm file that you have, be better at answering. Also, the other thing, the other concern is that using the next tag, while it makes a lot of sense to humans, it's also really hard to really have assurances of what's running. And what we would typically do is we always tag the images with multiple tags, and CodeFresh makes that very easy. So yeah, we would maybe tag it with next, but we always tag it with the commit SHA. And the commit SHA,
I'm doing that too. I'm doing the commit SHA with the CodeFresh branch normalized thing in front of it, so that which is what my namespace is as well. I also create a new namespace for each thing. So
exactly,
namespace is that, and then the image tag is that, and that's for the ephemeral environment. And then once it gets promoted to the next environment, it has that plus the next tag.
Yeah,
clear. And I'm only doing next because it was like, how other than pulling down the latest release from the CodeFresh from the registry. Once I do that, then I can use that instead, right?
So let's see here. I don't know if I can quickly enough.
I'll go upstairs real quick and go to the computer. I'm on mobile right now. And
okay, yeah. Because I don't think I have an example I can pull up, reasonably fast enough for this to not waste a lot of time on the call.
I don't mean to bogart. If anybody has any questions, I should probably go while I'm getting upstairs and changing my Zoom to the computer.
Sure thing. Also, Pierre, are you using Helm file as part of your process or no?
Yeah, I am, but not as Michael's planning it to do. So we have basically each application has the Helm charts, and then we have basic infrastructure, which is deployed by a Helm file. So basically our submanager, our ingress, all that stuff is deployed with Helm file, but the other stuff is not. Thinking about what he's trying to achieve, I think he could use JQ to see which tech is currently deployed, and then check basically if there's a difference, and then only deploy with Helm file, apply the changes that there actually are there. Because I think the sync and apply difference is only that there is.
So my understanding, like if we look at this example that I have here, is that he'll have many releases of related to this one monorepo. One could be Bolt, for example, and then there's an image, and then there's a tag here. And then he has multiple releases. So here's Bolt, and then down here will be another one like Grafana. And let's say he's reusing this syntax everywhere where he has the imaged required environment variable image tag, but he has that repeated everywhere. Then how do you target just one, changing the image tag maybe I understand. So your problem is that it's not deploying maybe if because you're using the next tag. And if you just target one service, how do you just target that one service to update? I think the disconnect here is that if you were using the commit SHA instead, and then deploying like Grafana with that commit SHA, then that one will update, but not the other ones. Because what you can do is you can combine required env with like a coalesce. So you could say like Grafana image tag, otherwise default to the default image tag. So that lets you override individual tags for individual environments or individual releases. But I'm guessing he is in the staircase right now. I won't do that. All right, we'll pause that temporarily.
I'm here. I'm here now.
Oh.
I can share.
Oh, back. Okay, cool. Post that to office hours.
What's that, my thing, or should I share my screen? What do you want to do?
Let's. Yeah, we can. I'll stop.
I'd rather not. Share my code on a thing because of proprietary. If you don't mind, here 1 second. I'll share my screen. Thank you very much.
Also, but just as a reminder, these are syndicated. If that's okay.
I don't mind that. I just
Yeah.
Okay, so you see my screen now, right? So
yep.
Here's what I have now. We have a mono repo, obviously, and then each of the services live here. And then I have this deploy folder, in which case I have the charts themselves.
Yeah.
And then I have the releases.
Yep.
And then I have app.yaml. And
yep.
So this is kind of what I'm doing with this right now.
Yep, this looks good. And now show me where the image tag is defined.
The image tag right now itself would be defined for ephemeral environment. Image right now is here. So it kind of has defaults to next, right? And then I override this, but it's also set, mind you, in the chart itself, which is I'm going to use. So
so here's the change that I would do. What you want to do is replace line 16 with a Go template interpolation, and there you're going to look for the value of articles image tag. And if articles image tag is empty, then you default it to next.
And I would get that by, just to be clear, I'm just doing this right now, so it would be articles. It knows the word articles?
No. So put like required, no, not required env. I'm drawing a blank on the exact function name right now. I think it's get or is it just env? Okay.
That's env.
And then space like this, right? And then
exactly.
Like
and then upper. Yeah, I would standard environment syntax. So it'd be exactly. So
like that, right?
So, yeah, but what I would actually do, because you want to surgically target one of your releases, not all of your releases. So now what I would do is I would change that to be prefix that with articles image tag.
Got it. That makes total sense now. And then whenever I'm going over something,
default value of this to be next.
Okay,
so
that totally makes sense.
You would, behind the env, you would basically do a pipe and then default next.
Yes, exactly.
Right. I got what you're saying. So the default is here, right?
The pipe default next.
Is it pipe now? Okay, I thought it was the other way.
I think so.
Pipelining.
Okay,
default pipe, yeah.
So here, pipeline default.
Yeah. And then a string with next.
Okay, got it. Makes sense. Okay.
And so now
for each of my services, and that way I can
exactly. So now you can surgically target each one of these with the tag you want to deploy, which would be in your case probably the commit SHA.
Right on. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That's an enormous help, because I know that
cool.
if I do this now, I can just run the Helm file just once, right?
You just run it once, and you call CF export or whatever to set that environment variable.
Awesome.
And to test this, I would just just export a ticket image tag and do a Helm file diff, and you get a diff, and it should only show this little change.
Yes,
if you change the environment.
Right. So set export articles image tag and then do that locally. I got you. Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay, that actually would solve many of the issues I'm running into about double deploying. So thanks, guys. I appreciate that. So I'll come off now and stop my share, but I appreciate the help.
Yeah.
I was looking forward to this like all week, because I was like, shit, I finally have an issue that's like hamstringing me.
think that Zachary had a question regarding to GitOps, if there's no one.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
One quick question. Do I get rid of the initial values that are in like the charts themselves and only use these values?
No, you don't. You can leave those. That doesn't matter because values.yaml will override whatever you've defined in those charts. So if you make your chart something deployable by default, I think that's a generally best practice. And now
that's what I was doing. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
All right.
And
next question.
Yeah, I feel if anyone has any like experiences with pipeline as code and managing it with many multiple development teams, I'm open to hear it. And I'm at a point now where I'm 20, 30, 40 repos, and there's old pipeline as code that I have to redo, and I'm struggling just working with some offshore teams, and when they won't let me touch stuff, and they won't accept my PRs, and it's driving me out of my mind. So I'm kind of curious, like if anyone's strategically worked around that other than myself. I'm working on like using outside libraries in some of my pipeline as code, and I keep on thinking I just want to do my own dedicated branch to do that. And that just seems wrong to me. It seems like an anti-pattern. So I'm curious if there's any other experiences out there.
So
I can
go on.
Talk about it if you want. So I had a similar issue. We had outsourced one of our projects, and the team was really afraid of if I do the pipeline stuff. And they had a very weird schema. I think you have a similar issue right now where they deploy to production and to a branch and have 3 different branches for environments, correct?
Yeah, we have multiple branches. We're doing per environment branches at the moment.
Okay. So one of the issues that annoyed me the most was that I never knew which features were deployed in which branch. And so I just enforced a hard rule. Everything goes to master, and we use ClickOps to promote. This was the only way for me to manage it. But also you could have the deployment process in a separate repo and have just updating the available commit jars or put the available Docker tags pushed into a different repo out of the code pipeline, and then manage the deployment process in a second repository.
Okay, that's what I'm starting to veer towards. So at least I know I'm not feeling like I'm totally off my rocker and going that route. So yeah,
maybe Eric, you also have. The
question I also know that Andrew Roth has some experience with this. I think I might have misinterpreted the original question. If you want to just restate the problem again.
Well, so I've got a lot of pipeline as code in the repos, as it probably should be, right? It's how it's supposed to be. And I'm to the point now where I've got multiple repos that I'm helping manage as a singular DevOps resource amongst multiple teams. And certain teams and projects are more sensitive, and they will not allow me to make pipeline changes easily. It's just seeming like we're, although I am in a release, I'm going to try to maintain a cadence with the development teams. In some cases, I need to make changes to their pipelines to standardize and improve things, and they're not letting me. Yeah, I guess like a better way of describing it, and it seems like there might be a better way to do this.
So they're concerned about changes in flight to kind of these pipelines that could reduce the stability of deployments.
Right.
So
I don't blame them, honestly. It's not.
No, I mean these things can break pretty frequently. Okay, so one other kind of procedural thing or organizational thing is adding code owners, right? So that when changes to the pipelines happen, members of their team that are set as code owners for those pipelines have to approve on those changes. So that's one way to enforce it without disabling kind of like the ability to do pipelines as code. So that's one thing, and then so pipelines, those themselves are have their own life cycle almost, right? That you need to be able to validate that that's not breaking things. And do you have are you able? What are the common types of changes to the pipelines, and are those can those changes be validated by using preview environments?
And that's the changes that I'm looking at. So we put these things together about a year ago, and there's a voluminous amount of Python delivery code and things like that I personally wrote that I'm not even proud of, but it was needed at the time, right?
Yeah.
And so, there's things, and that, as we all know, the more code that you have in your pipelines, the less simple it is, and less simple it is, the more it's breakable, right?
Yeah.
So, I'm trying to simplify things down and make it as declarative as possible. And going back to some of these old, still working pipelines, and trying to like remove unneeded elements and things along those lines. So I am unfortunately stuck in Azure DevOps in this particular case, but I've used it to its fullest to do things like pull out pipelines into its own repo and reference that repo externally, and I greatly simplified a lot of the various repos pipeline code. But in the same regards, I'm pointing to an outside repo for the code. So that's for better or worse, that's what I'm doing. But I want to do this more for some of the other, for some of the more delicate pipelines. And I'm just finding that I'm tripping up and with working with some of the developers on these things. And maybe it's just a me thing, but I'm just wondering if anyone else has dealt with it in any other way. I keep on thinking maybe I should just have a dedicated branch for pipeline code, in each repo that they can't mess with, and that, sort of strips the control from the team. But then that's really not it doesn't feel right, so and it would break other things. So I don't know, that's just sort of
the code, are you using GitHub or using another VCS?
It's the Azure DevOps repositories. So
okay, I'm not familiar with those.
It is a lot of hassle working in the ADO environment. So
okay, so the code owners might not apply to that then.
Right. Well, it's a similar case. They have branch policies and whatnot that I've been slowly been able to get enforced. So, but yeah, code owners they've got something similar. Like I have people notified when there's changes, but then getting them to approve it's a different story. So
maybe I can have a separate conversation with you, because it's maybe a little bit out of scope for this conversation or for this talk right now, but I had encountered exactly the same issues that you had. This application team removed the pipeline stuff that I introduced, and because I have like 52 repositories that I'm working on, I wasn't aware of it, and then they said, well, we are not able to push anymore because I restricted the kubectl access, and I wasn't even aware that they push differently now. Maybe if you want to
52 plus repositories at the same time, right?
Right. Gets hard, especially if you have like 120 engineers working on stuff.
All really smart people, it's not like,
Yeah.
They'll find a way around things. So yeah, I'd like to chat with you on the side. I appreciate that. Thank you.
No worries.
That's really nice, Peter. Thanks. All right, I was going to wait. Igor was asking if we were still going to do the Cloudflare demo, and I do want to do that. I was going to give him a second to join here. I'll get the Cloudflare teed up in the meantime. Any questions?
No, but I love Cloudflare. So.
Well, I guess if we're, I'm trying to deploy GitLab on Kubernetes, and it's going to be publicly facing. So I'm trying to do it like I want it to be an exemplary deployment. And I've been using their Helm chart, or I should say the instructions for their Helm chart. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, there's got to be a better way to do this. There just seem to be lots and lots of little moving parts. Like, oh, you want to do S3, then you got to go over to this YAML file and tweak that. Oh, you want to use S3 with IAM roles. Oh, hang on a second. Now you got to run. So suddenly I find myself like trying to configure KIM.
Yeah, it's I don't have.
Does it suck for everyone, or is it just me?
It's not just you.
Okay.
You'll see all these beautiful demos of, look, Ma, I did it. It's that easy, but the reality is once you get to like operationalizing something for production, you got to worry about provisioning IAM roles. You got to get those roles into your services. You got to choose if it's like, okay, in this case, you need an S3 bucket. Okay, you got to provision that bucket. You got to provision the roles for that. So that's why we have so much freaking Terraform stuff to support Kubernetes stuff, because there's so much that Kubernetes can't do that is like cloud platform specific.
Yeah.
This is where, it's just we're a little bit early in terms of where things are in Kubernetes, but like the operator, that Kubeform that was shared earlier by Pierre, that looks interesting, or like the AWS service operator. The idea here is that if you can get more of this stuff all into Kubernetes, so you're not bridging tool sets, then it gets easier, because you can have a Helm chart that says, hey, provision this Terraform code and take the outputs of that and stick it into this Kubernetes secret, and then, blah, 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 do all this other stuff in Kubernetes. I don't know that many people, I don't know anyone doing this, though, really in production right now. Typically, multiple pipelines that have steps that this part does the Terraform, this part does the Kubernetes, and trying to make this turnkey for net new applications doesn't happen at all.
I'll just man up and
Yeah, I don't know. Anybody disagree with what I said there? I would love to be wrong.
No. Okay.
All right. Okay, so here is Cloudflare. Cloudflare workers have gotten a lot of attention. Cloudflare workers are a little bit like running Lambdas on the edge, like AWS Lambdas. I am not like a super expert at doing this stuff, but I think that's a testament to workers. But because you don't have to be very hardcore to get a benefit out of them. So let me go about like how we've benefited from using workers, and I think these are some common problems that others might have too. So like, we launched our podcast at podcast.cloudposse.com, and that's through Buzzsprout. And Buzzsprout offers branded kind of microsites for your podcast. Lots of other services do this too. For example, Get Review, what we use for our newsletter, that also offers branded sites. The thing is, how do you have all these different microsites that they never give you the ability to customize the menu on them? They never give you the ability to change the CSS on these things. Yet it's your brand. You want to have control over those things. So how do you do that? Well, Cloudflare Workers makes this pretty awesome, because if you go over here like to your DNS settings, and when you set up like the DNS for, let this load here for a second. All right. So let's take a look at the DNS for our podcast. So here's the podcast. No, that's the TXT record. Yeah, here's the podcast. So you see it's a CNAME to the Buzzsprout URL, but it's proxy. So that means all requests are going through Cloudflare. So if I go over here to workers, I can now set up a route that says podcast star first goes through this worker here. And let me just make sure, unfortunately, there's no really good secrets management thing here. So let me just make sure that I'm not going to leak any secrets by opening up this example.
Mm-hmm. You're muted, or
I hit mute somehow. Thanks for calling that out. All right, so what we have here is an example of where we're rewriting the content on the fly that we get back from the upstream request from Cloudflare. So what I'm doing here, the objective is that Buzzsprout they offer this podcast stuff, but they hijack the canonical link so that they say buzzsprout.com is canonical for my podcast, yet I have a branded site. That's not cool. So what did I do? I just configured the Cloudflare worker to rewrite that content on the fly. So here I rewrite all A tags, link tags, and meta tags on the fly. And when I see these patterns, I just replace it with podcast.cloudposse.com. So that gave me full control over the content there, which is cool. I can also do things like rewrite the sitemap XML to point to links in our own site as opposed to their site. So that was some of the examples there that we did. Another example that's really cool is, let's see here. If you need to dynamically install headers, like content security policies, you can do that on the fly. For example, we're using the Slackin plugin, the Slackin Node.js app for Slack invites. We could go modify that code, but then that's just more overhead that we got to do. And we just want to do simple things like maybe add CSP headers. So here's the ability that we can do that on the fly for those requests. A very simple little script. Streaming optimizations. No, I want to go to Slack archive redirects. So many of you run single page applications, SPAs. You deploy those to a service like S3. You're limited in what you can do. So if you wanted to do a redirect, it's maybe a little bit harder to do. So very common pattern is you have a stub file that has a meta refresh equiv in there, and that meta refresh does the redirect. But that kind of sucks because you first see a blank page and then it redirects, and it's not good. So here's an example where we fetch the upstream, and then we look for that tag, and then we do a rewrite automatically, a 301, and serve that back to that if we see that regex matches. So that's how we sped up our site.
Do you actually see the console.logs? Can you see them somewhere? Or?
So yeah, so what's kind of cool is the way they've done it. So if I go here to, I gotta go change domain in this case, suiteops.com, and then go to so here's this route. I've configured everything to go to Slack archive redirects. I can launch the editor. I'm going to open up Slack archive redirects. I'm going to go to that domain here. URL bar. All right, so all the console logs and everything, my debug output I see here.
Oh, okay.
So this makes it really good that you can just iterate very quickly. You can just update the preview as you're updating your code here without deploying it and seeing it. So it's a safe kind of development mode. The downside is they don't provide any access to logs, period. Cloudflare, it's not a service. So what you got to do is you got to integrate with Sentry or some other third-party service where you can basically post your exceptions and your log events and stuff to some third-party service. Related to this, there's another similar feature that's existed in Cloudflare for a long time, but was implemented using workers, I believe, behind the scenes. But now I'm just truly in love with for these reasons. So if we go to apps. They have a marketplace on Cloudflare with all these hacks. It's like a marketplace of hacks, like the different blades of your Swiss Army knife. And there's a few in here that are really special. So if I go over to installed apps, one is you can inject a site nav onto any page. You can add CSS onto any page. You can install a tag manager on any page. You can add HTML to any page. So you can see how you can really do anything you want at this point with any page, any site that's part of your network. So like if I go now to podcast.cloudposse.com. I have a navigation menu here. That's not provided by them. That's provided by Cloudflare. That drops me over to the newsletter. Would you look at that? I got a navigation menu. That's not provided by them. That's provided by Cloudflare. So all these things let me stitch together all these different properties provided by different services that have microsites. And Get Review, they had a really bad CSS problem that made this stuff look, it doesn't look beautiful now, don't get me wrong, but it looked atrocious before. And I was able to inject my own CSS to clean that stuff up.
That's cool.
Yep, it's very cool.
Wow, this is amazing.
Yeah, so Cloudflare is pretty rad in that sense. There are other examples. I'm not going to say names of services that do this, but there are certain sites that you got to pay up if you want to have a branded host name. Not anymore. If you use Cloudflare, you can change the origin of your requests, and you can serve it under any domain you want on your site. So you can do your own branded versions or microsites of services like that.
Oh, wow. And this is under the free offering too.
Yeah, you basically, and the pricing, like Cloudflare, I mean, God bless them. They're really fair on their pricing. It's not, they have also overage pricing. So you can start for free, and then they have a reasonable rate that you can pay per million requests or something like that. I hate these services that, require you suddenly to, you go from spending $50 a month, then they want a 1-year commitment at $1,500 a month.
Yeah.
How does the basic CDN compare to CloudFront?
Say that one more time.
Sorry, just the basic CDN capabilities. How does that compare to something like AWS CloudFront?
Well, so AWS CloudFront, it's pretty easy to beat that. That's probably the worst CDN functionality-wise that I've used. Now, it's gotten a lot better with the Edge Lambdas on CloudFront, but the fact that any change you make to CloudFront takes 30 minutes to propagate, that's a massive business liability, right? Ooh, we made some mistake, an honest mistake. Okay, this is down for 30 minutes. I don't like that. What's pretty rad with Cloudflare is changes take seconds or less most of the time.
And do you manage it through Terraform or manually?
I confess, we personally are not for these things, but Cloudflare is investing a lot into their Terraform providers, and I believe a lot of this stuff can be done with Terraform. They also have a command line tool. I forget what it's called, but they have a command line tool to manage this stuff and be more command line driven. Perhaps somebody here can correct me maybe, but I don't believe Cloudflare has scoped API keys, and that's kind of scary. What I've seen done for companies that want to use Terraform with Cloudflare and control kind of the blast radius of changes is you can actually, you can use proxies with Terraform, right? So then there's a company called VGS, Very, Very Good Security. And Very Good Security is pretty rad because they'll be your man-in-the-middle proxy, and that you tokenize basically that request. You can use dummy credentials, and you can scope requests to certain paths, basically certain API endpoints, and it will inject the tokens only for those requests, only from IPs that you want, only using credentials that you set, and those credentials, if exfiltrated or leaked, are useless to anyone else. So yeah, Terraform with very good security and Cloudflare is kind of like the pattern there. We're almost at the end of the hour here, so I'm not going to do a demo of this, but if it's interesting, we can do something, arrange a better demo of this. The idea here is like you can create a route for like API.GitHub. You can whitelist a certain IP range. And then when these conditions are met, for example, the path is such and such, then you can do replacements on fields in that request.
Cool.
And since most things support the HTTP proxy convention, then you can just have this happen transparently. All right.
Eric, do you know anything about the California data protection laws that got into effect at the beginning of the year?
The GDPR stuff?
Well, I don't know how you call it in California. Yeah, but I think it is the equivalent of this, yeah.
Yeah. We haven't been doing that much. We have, yeah, we haven't, by our customers been asked to help them with any of that stuff too much.
Okay.
The cool thing though is with Cloudflare, you can implement that across the board automatically. You can, those retarded little pop-ups you have to have now on sites that say, hey, we're installing cookies, as if you didn't know, and those cookies store information. Well, with this, if they click no, Cloudflare can automatically always drop the cookies, so you can't track them.
Yeah, there's some issues. A bank in Germany implemented Cloudflare last weekend and didn't update their data processing agreements on their webpage and didn't inform the customers because they were under DDoS attack. And basically, Cloudflare, they did this TLS termination thing, and now all the customers are pretty pissed off because they gave Cloudflare all their banking information. And but that's the thing that has happened in Germany, and it's a pretty big GDPR violation.
Wait, they screwed up the cache rules, so they were caching private data?
But I think this was the initial thing that happened, but they didn't inform the customers that there is now a middleman. You have to have data processing agreements with the companies, and they have to be accessible for your end users.
Interesting.
And they did not do that, and yeah.
No, that is really interesting. So I don't know, if somebody else is using Cloudflare in EU and can share more information about that next time, maybe that'd be really interesting. Yeah. That'd be cool. All right, everyone. Looks like we've reached the end of the hour, and that about wraps things up. Thanks again for sharing. I've learned a lot this time, and I think some others got their problem solved, so that's pretty cool. A recording of this call will be posted in the Office Hours channel. We'll also be syndicating it to our podcast. So see you guys next week, same time, same place. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.